Welcome to the Global discussion with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. My name is Simon Hodgkins. Today, a pleasure to be joined by Leslie Zane. Leslie, you're very welcome to the show. Let me begin by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself because you've got a few different things going on, a wonderful book we can talk about. Tell us a little bit about Leslie and what you're involved in.
Hi, Simon. First of all, it's great to be here today. Thank you so much for having me. I'm involved in too many things right now. I run a company called Triggers Brand Consulting, and I made the tremendous mistake of trying to write a book on top of running a company. Not a wise move. I don't suggest it to any of your listeners. But I started out in marketing and brand management early in my career. Ever since Harvard Business School, I made the rounds to different wonderful big companies. And I was astounded at the fact that many of the businesses and brands that the companies owned weren't growing. And I said, what's up with that? How is this even possible? Here I am at P&G, the marketing capital of the universe. If they don't know how to make marketing the engine of growth, that means nobody knows. And I quickly learned that companies don't really have an institutionalized, repeatable process for driving growth. And I also realized that if I stayed inside the corporate world, that I wouldn't be able to follow my vision, which was to create this replicable process. And so I left in 1995 to start my own company and ended up coming back to serve the very companies that I had left. And over the years, over the 30 years that I've been in business, we have essentially cracked the code on how to accelerate growth for brands and businesses. And that's what I have finally shared in my book, so that I can bring these techniques to more people who don't have the ability to work with a consulting firm in their own lives.
Well, look, that's a great, enticing introduction for people watching or listening to us around the world. We're definitely interested in cracking the code. And, as a founder, as somebody running a successful business, somebody with the experience that you bring to the table, as well as the book, and you said, as well as the author, and we'll get onto the book now in a second. I know you've been on the TED stages, and I know you've got a lot of things going on. But let's talk about the power of instinct then. Let's get into it. Why the title? Tell us, people who pick up The Power of Instinct, this book uh, that you've written, what's in it? What can people expect? And where did the whole concept come from, Leslie?
Great question. So, if you've ever tried to change somebody's mind, whether it's in business or in your personal life, you know how hard it is to do. But that's what companies and people have been trying to do for over 100 years. And the traditional approach is trying to persuade the conscious mind to do what it doesn't want to do. And it's resistance, it doesn't work. In my book, The Power of Instinct, I teach people and organizations how to harness the instinctive mind by basically bypassing the conscious mind altogether using cognitive shortcuts so that they can scale their businesses, their brands, their personal brands, their ideas, their social causes faster in that unconscious mind. Essentially, think of the conscious mind as the path of greatest resistance to a sale, and the unconscious mind as the path of least resistance to a sale.
Got it. And so you, in the book, I know you talk about the age of instinct, sort of that era starting 2020, but also that it sort of goes against, I suppose, that traditional marketing script that we're all used to, right? Could you maybe expand on that a little bit for us?
Absolutely. So, traditional marketing has been focused on trying to persuade people to do what they don't want to do. And we have all different kinds of techniques that we use to do that. We barrage people with messages, we use coupons and discounts, all manner of techniques to try to basically cajole, persuade, force somebody to do what they don't want to do. And it doesn't work for two reasons. Number one, the conscious mind is resistant to change. It's skeptical. It thinks it knows best. and it doesn't want to do what you tell it to do. And number two, the conscious mind only makes up about 5% of the decisions that we make as human beings, whether it be about brands or, to brush your teeth in the morning. It's our instinctive mind that takes over. And 95% of our decisions are made by the instinctive mind. So almost think about it this way: we're expending 100% of our time, energy, and resources on only 5% of the decisions that people make if we use persuasion. So that's a waste of time. What we need to do is we need to circumvent the conscious mind altogether and use a different set of techniques to harness instinct. And it turns out that the instinctive mind is much more malleable. You can change it much faster. And that way you can accomplish what you are trying to do, whether it's increase your market share or build your personal brand, or sell your art to art galleries, like whatever it is you're trying to do. You can do that faster and more easily by going through that path of least resistance, the unconscious mind.
And I think, you're touching on something that's really important there because of this sort of rigidity, this skepticism, this sort of resistance to change that sort of seems to be hardwired a little bit. And also that traditional versus instinctual type of approach. It's really interesting. And it brings me on to something that I definitely have to ask you about. And this is the brand connectome, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, which I believe is trademarked too. Could you tell us a bit about that? Because I find that fascinating the way you've sort of approached that.
So the brand connectome is the cumulative memories that have gotten glued to a brand in people's minds over time, some going as far back as childhood. So if it's Pepsi or McDonald's, these are brands that have been around a very long time. And so you probably have memories that have collected in your unconscious mind about that brand, going very far back. The brand connectome is the set of neural pathways that holds those memories, holds those associations, and the brand connectome is actually what's calling the shots when you go to the store to pick your brand. So you walk into the supermarket, essentially, you pretty much make a beeline for a couple of your go to brands, and you reach, you put them in your cart, and you walk out. Some people might even call it, sleep shopping, because you're not standing there deciding about the benefits of this one and that one. Which should I buy, A or B? It's none of that. For the most part, you are reaching, putting it in your cart and walking out. And if your brain didn't have the ability to make those very fast decisions, you would be in the supermarket all week. But you're not, because your brand has a command control center, which is actually dictating which brands you reach for. And that command control center is the brand connectome. And we can talk more about what a brand connectome looks like, and what a healthy one is, and what makes somebody actually reach for these brands. But a quick way to understand it is that the more connections the brand has in the mind, the more it is the brand that you reach for. So the more spokes, the more branches it has, it means it has more touch points in your mind. It's going to have a larger physical footprint. And that large physical footprint is going to give it salience in your mind. And that salience drives instinctive brand preference, where you're just reaching for a brand automatically. This has been mischaracterized as loyalty, which sounds like, you've got some conscious devotion to brands. You love your brands. There's no such thing as love. I mean, there's no such thing as love when it comes to brands. Let me correct myself there. But what you're doing is really it's your brand connectome that is actually dictating the choices that you make. And it's a habit after you do it over and over again. And the reason that habit exists is because you have a large physical brand connectome that is essentially telling you what to do. So you don't make your choices in the supermarket or pretty much anywhere else in life. It's your brand connectome, and you are powerless to resist.
Wow, that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. And what springs to mind is I think a lot of people, and even I, can relate to that. That it's a very powerful mechanism that makes you reach for a certain thing, and you're really getting into it there. And it leads me on to something else I want to talk to you about, which is emotion. Because on one hand, you're talking about childhood and advertising, and you sort of get used to a brand and you see it, and then this connect home phenomenon kicks in. But when it comes to emotion, we've seen a lot of companies put a lot of dollars into emotional advertising. And I know you've got some thoughts on that, because it may not be the best approach in the medium to longer term, particularly maybe as it relates to the connect home. Am I right in saying that, Leslie?
You are 100% right. This is one of my biggest frustrations in the world of marketing and advertising. You see, in the mid 2000s, Daniel Kahneman, the famous behavioral economist, told the world, and it became popularized and kind of went mainstream, that we're irrational creatures and we make decisions, that may not even be good for us, but we make these choices on instinct. And I think the marketing and advertising world leapt to the conclusion that therefore that means we need to create emotional positioning, emotional advertising, emotional branding. And it turns out it was really a misunderstanding of how the whole process works, because emotion actually goes in one ear and out the other. Make somebody laugh, make somebody cry. That doesn't last. It's not sticky. It doesn't sink into memory structure. The only things that actually sink into memory structure are assets, verbal and visual assets. It can also be a smell, it can also be something that you touch or that you taste, those things also. But in the world of marketing, essentially, we're talking about verbal and visual cues. And what I'm saying to you is those are the things that remain. So you want to create, if you're developing your brand, you want to create assets, things that last, like, just do it for Nike, or the snow capped mountain on the Aquafina bottled water. Those are the kinds of things that actually remain in people's subconscious, in their memories, and little by little, those create these brand connectomes that are made up of those assets. That's what we really have to tackle when it comes to managing our brands.
I really love that because you've taken us in a very short period of time from powerless to powerful. And I think the what you're talking about there, I can instantly relate to because it could be the sound or a smell, and instantly you're transported somewhere, right? There's a connection, a real strong connection to something. And as you were saying, it's those cues, whereas the emotion can be a little bit in and out. And it's funny because when we look at the emotional pull, as the pull on the heartstrings or the mind, I'm not sure, or a bit of both. In the moment, it feels like the most important thing, and these brands are doing the right thing. But actually, over time, that's missing the right cue, isn't it? And it's fascinating. So thank you for sharing that. And before I change gear, I want to ask you a bit about the industry, because from your vantage point, you understand this better than, a lot of the big companies, big brands, big ad agencies out there. But have you seen a change over the last number of decades? Are brands, are companies actually embracing this now? Is the message getting through, or is it just as frustrating as ever? Where are we at, Leslie?
Well, listen, I think business in general is always frustrating. I think business is easy and people make it hard. I joke around with my team sometimes. If we had no people, the work would be very easy. No, I'm just joking around with you. When it was very early in my career, I would say that people pretty much thought that I was, off my rocker, and I was saying something that they had no evidence around. The science hadn't come out yet. People were not talking about behavioral science, they weren't talking about neuroscience, and here I was talking about instinct. I thought that we were over promoting and over discounting, and I didn't understand why we needed to force people to buy the brands that they did. In my view, that meant that we hadn't created an instinctive connection or an instinctive brand preference. So I was challenging a lot of norms. And yes, in those years, it was very, very frustrating. But I would say over the past 30 years, and it's taken a very long time, but the world has kind of caught up. And I actually think that the combination of COVID with an emphasis on mental health and wellness and AI, and we can talk more about the similarities between AI and behavioral science in a moment, but we're now seeing a tremendous wave of interest in what we do. To the point that we can almost not, you know, deliver enough um, to the point that we actually can't supply the demand that we have. So now I would say that these concepts have gone more mainstream, and I also think that leaders have gotten tired of the clicks and the impressions and all that just kind of not working and not delivering the growth that they need. So yes, now I no longer feel like I'm pushing a rock uphill. I feel like more like people are really interested in this area and they're asking us for help to bring these ideas to their businesses.
Thank you for sharing that insight, Leslie. It's very, very good to hear you say that. And look, you've mentioned the magical world of AI, and it sort of crept up on us and then went exploded. This must be having an impact. I'd love to get your thoughts on that before we wrap up with a few other quick fire questions. Tell us about AI and the impact this is having, and what are your thoughts on it?
So the reason that we have AI at this point is because the scientists, the brain scientists, finally realized that the brain is not a sequential machine like a computer that goes through a series of logical sequential steps, but rather the brain is an analogic machine and it's constantly connecting the dots. And so, what AI is doing, and the reason that it can spit out these solutions so quickly, is that it's connecting millions of dots faster, as fast, but certainly as fast, but faster now than the human brain can do it. Um, and so, really, what we're talking about is the brain makes connections. That's how the brain works. If I say snow-capped mountain to you, you're going to say, well, go ahead, tell me what you would say. If I say, what associations come to
The
mind?
Aquafina, Mont Blanc, that comes to mind for me. Yeah.
Yes, and think just what are associations just with a snow-capped mountain alone in the bottled water category. You would say pure, pristine, eco-friendly, water
Yeah.
from the glaciers, right? Like all of
Yeah.
these things. So that's what your brain is doing. It's connecting the dots. And so that's how AI works. And it turns out that's how the connectome works. So the brand connectome is the first model that we can use as marketers, as stewards of brand health, to manage our brands by understanding the connections that the mind makes that you may not want it to be making, right? Because most of marketing has been focused on basically giving people a list of attributes, and then the people tell you whether or not your brand is hitting those attributes. That's not what the brand connectome really is. It's the organic connections, the organic associations that a consumer or a customer, B2B or B2C, has made about your brand, some of which may be helpful, positive associations, and some of which may be negative associations that are going to get in the way of growth, that are going to hurt you, that are going to keep them from converting. So that's really the similarity between AI and the brand connectome, is that they are both built on the premise that the brain is a connection machine.
So, Leslie, before we move on, what makes a healthy brand or a healthy connectome? What's the secret sauce there?
So there's three things you want to look for. First of all, you want salience. You want this brand connectome to be physically large in people's minds. That means it should have as many connections, as many associations as possible. Think of this like a game of Monopoly. Whoever owns the most physical real estate in the mind wins. So physically large. Two, you want to have a higher ratio of positive to negative associations. Negative associations, if they get into your brand connectome, are like a virus. Think of dead leaves on a tree. You want to nip those dead leaves in the bud as soon as they come out and push them aside because you want a higher ratio of positive to negative. And then third, you want distinctiveness. But please note that I use the word distinctiveness, not uniqueness. Uniqueness is a foolish Uniqueness is a foolhardy pursuit because the brain is actually hardwired to connect with the familiar, not with the unique. So, familiarity is actually more powerful than uniqueness, but distinctiveness is best of all because with distinctiveness, you take the familiar and you put a little creative twist on it. And now you have something that really connects with people because it's riding familiar neural pathways, but you've kind of co opted them to make them your own, part of your brand. So, those are the three things: large, positive, and distinctive. Those are the three things that make for a healthy brand connectome.
That's a huge takeaway. Thank you for explaining that and adding that into your conversation today. Distinctiveness, I absolutely love. So powerful. Thank you so much, Leslie. Let's move on to the quick fire round before we wrap up today. I want to ask you about the next 6 to 12 months. What's on your radar? How do you go about thinking, planning? What's in your world? What's happening? How does the next year look for you?
For us at our business, we are very focused on continuing to bring our capability to new verticals. So if you think about it, back in the early 90s when we started out, most of our clients were in CPG, consumer packaged goods, because those were the kinds of companies that were doing consumer work really of any kind. And then little by little, we've added new categories: pharmaceuticals, healthcare, financial services, insurance. And so I would say the next 6 months, we're continuing to expand because it's really important to me to show myself, to show the world, to show my clients that what we're talking about here is category and industry agnostic. It really works for everything because it's how humans decide. So that's our key goal over the next 6 months, is to continue to expand into new verticals and essentially be able to use triggers and our approach throughout the entire business landscape.
That sounds like an exciting time ahead. That's for sure, Leslie. Last two questions. Number one, is there anything we haven't touched on today that you would like to share with our audience, or maybe something we have stumbled on that you think needs a little bit more explanation? So, a parting thought for our audience. And secondly, and really importantly, if people want to find out more about you, about your company, about the wonderful book, about the Connectome, where's the best place for us to point people to as we come to an end here?
In terms of a wrap up, I would just basically say that instinct is the most powerful force for changing human behavior. And so, really, anything that you're trying to do, if you can bypass the conscious mind and harness instinct, you're going to be able to make change in your world faster. And that means getting a new job, using these techniques. If you are going on an interview, you're trying to get a promotion, so you can use this in your personal life, or maybe it's just trying to get your partner to take out the garbage. I don't know. But I know that in the book, I really show all the many ways that you can apply this approach in both your business and your personal life. And it's really important to me, use the word empowerment early on. It's really important to me for everyone to understand that the brain is malleable and that nobody is stuck in their ways. And no, even personal brand that has had some negative associations is stuck the way it is. We are masters, and we are masters of the environment around us, and we can make change much more easily than people think if you use these techniques to accomplish anything that you really want. So that's what I would say in terms of a wrap up, and in terms of connecting with me, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find my book on Amazon, The Power of Instinct: The New Rules of Persuasion in Business and Life. It's also offered at Barnes and Noble and all the independent bookstores. So I just hope that people will really enjoy it and it will use them. I hope they'll be able to use the new rules to help them accomplish anything that they're trying to and reach their dreams.
Well, that brings us nicely to the end of our time today. We're definitely going to have to come back and talk more. There's so much information here, and there's a lot more we can unpack. But I encourage everybody to rush out, get the power of instinct, go and find out all about the great work that Leslie and the team are doing. It truly is groundbreaking, and it's really going to help. And I think it's definitely worth your investigation and your time to go and source that out and check that out. I want to thank everybody around the world who's watching or listening to this episode, and make sure that you follow, like, subscribe, do everything we need you to do to help support the show. And hopefully, you'll join me back here for some more discussions with creatives and leaders and thinkers just like Leslie. Thank you, Leslie, for being on the show. It's been a wonderful time to spend with you. Thank you for imparting a lot of wisdom, some great takeaways. Thank you so much indeed for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a privilege.